everybody, all of you who have joined this session. And first of all, thank you, a big thank you to Praveen, Chirandeep, and Uddhav for taking out time to join this session, and hope we have a fantastic discussion. So I'll start off with the fact that I have been privileged to work with all three of you in different forms, and I've seen some of cutting edge work being done in your organizations, and more so, I think, across various adoption journeys, partaked in some of them. And so the interesting part, I think, for all of us in this session is we've Chirandeep from manufacturing, Praveen from fashion retail, and Uddhav from oil and gas. So we have like all three domains connected by a single common thread, which is how do we adopt AI, and they have been participant to a lot of them. So I'll start with a quick sense of what topic or the theme that I would like all of us to, discuss, and Praveen, Chirandeep, and Uddhav is. We know that a major portion of the success of an implementation of an AI solution for an organization to see impact is really how good are we executing it on the ground, right? And we all, I think, have seen how an organization has to be what I call a pre-ready and post-ready. So the theme that I would like all of you maybe throw light for us and the audience around the globe is how your organizations in the different domains that you operate have been able to make your organization AI ready. So starting with you, Praveen, actually, I've seen you have a unique case of this. You've been championing a lot of multi-brand, implementation across the various brands of Aditya Birla Fashion Retail. So maybe you could just talk about how it has been to have so many brand nuances taking into an adoption journey.
Thanks, Mamita, for inviting me on this panel, and it's really good to talk about some of our experiences, using AI, and I'll use AI in a broader sense in terms of AI, machine learning, advanced analytics, to broadly algorithms. Is how I will look at when I'm talking about AI in a broader sense. So fashion. So we are a largest fashion retailer in India with over currently about 25 brands. Some homegrown, some acquired, some partnerships with leading international brands. Some of our major brands are Pantaloons, Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Peter England, Forever 21, American Eagle, now Sabyasachi, Shantanu Nikhil, Dave Koof as well. So a variety of different brands with different market positioning. So I like to say that we today have certain brands where let's say a woman's top is priced at 250 rupees, and other brand where it is priced at 250,000 rupees as well. Right, so it's the entire range. So the needs of all brands differ. However, what we have seen is that when it comes to using algorithms, it is a good approach to build platforms for certain capabilities and then fine-tune the use cases to specific brand names. So some of the major use cases that we have been working on, one clearly, since it's a consumer business, is in terms of personalization. So personalization, we operate at two levels. We do personalization from a campaign perspective when we are communicating to customers, and we do personalization on our websites and apps, which is real time, where as each customer gets to see a different merchandise based on their what they select while browsing, what their past purchasing history has been, and so on. So we have an AI algorithm which powers this. Similarly, we have another one where we do weekly campaigns, monthly campaigns, and there are specific use cases as to when a brand wishes to communicate on what trigger with which customer. And there is an algorithm built which looks at this as a single view of customer segment of one, and creates a specific communication for that customer which is specific to that brand's use cases, and sends it out. So these are the personalization use cases which are on the front end. Apart from this, some other interesting use cases that we have deployed are one very key one is on cataloging of fashion. So fashion is one industry where the product changes every 6 months, right? Maybe 5 to 10% of our products actually are what we call core, which means they remain for maybe several seasons, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing which is really long term other than maybe innerwear, and even there the product changes at least in 2 or 3 years. So since the large amount of products that we make and release every month nowadays, we typically do a release of a drop every month. The whole process of cataloging those products for e-commerce, whether our own brand.com or whether it's for selling on marketplaces like Amazon, Myntra, Flipkart, and so on, it's a major activity. So what we've done here is that we have built an visual AI-based algorithm which can take photo shoots. Since we always do photo shoots for our products, take the photo shoots and use that to actually capture most of the visual attributes, such as color, style, pattern, hem length, collar type, things like that, right? Just by visual inspection. And again, this differs from brand to brand. So there are some of our brands which are Western wear, where in some ways doing this is a lot easier. And then there is ethnic wear. Indian ethnic wear is very complicated, and what attributes need to be captured again differ a lot. So while the core platform is the same, so we use a common tool that's been built, but you have to fine tune that tool to get the accuracy right at the brand level, at a category level, for it to really deliver you the value, which is, speed of cataloging, minimum cost in terms of doing manual corrections, and so on. So that's a second use case that maybe I would like to talk about. A third one would be, what we call as the pricing, which is markdown management. Again, in our business, we go through a season. At the end of the season, we do discounting. Some cases we do discounting during the season. If some product is not moving, we find we need to do discounting during the season. And this is for tens of thousands of SKUs which are sold across multiple channels online, through department stores, in our own store network, which is almost 3,000 stores, right? Some things will sell somewhere, some things will not sell somewhere. So the problem statement is to decide what should you price and or what should you move. I mean, the solution could also be that maybe something is selling in some part of the country but not in another, but you have inventory lying somewhere else, so you move it. So the whole inventory management and pricing management in this complex matrix of multiple channels, multiple outlets, and large number of SKUs is something again we have built algorithms to handle. And that's again it's fine-tuned to each business, to each brand, to each business, because pricing levers differ. Some cases you can discount significantly, some cases you can't, some cases it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to just hold and maybe re-release the product in the next season. So all those calls have to be built into the specific way the algorithm is configured for that brand. But it's a core platform which does markdown management, as we like to call it. These are a few of the examples, Mamita, that I would like to share as part of the discussion.
No, that world is so dynamic. Every weekend is different. Every season is different. So I think the velocity of the data, the use of AI is really at the edge, right? So thank you so much, Praveen. Now I'll move to a very different domain. Chirandeep, to you. I think we move from, that's the fun, right? I have fun of my job, at least, is moving from apparel to tire manufacturing sector. So Chirandeep, I know I have been fascinated by, and I think the whole world who is listening, to the amount of data, device data, the IoT, the industry, all at the manufacturing, because your devices really speak, right? So with all this plethora of data, Chirandeep, and I think you have a tough one at hand to actually have a very core manufacturing setup to move these AI solutions in. So how has been that journey?
Hey, hi, good morning, Momita. Thanks for having me. So talking about the journey that we have in our tire manufacturing sector and the others, so we also do a lot of manufacturing in other areas, starting from pharmaceuticals to electrical components, right? So I'll quickly impress on one of the journeys that we had with CEAT in recent times. And if you had been following the news in the last few months, you might know that CEAT got Lighthouse certified, which is a certification given by WF based on its usage of Industry 4.0. So if you look into our journey and how we got that certified was, and this also becomes very important from the adoption point of view. Because adoption in many of the cases, and we have done this mistake in the past, we have started projects without considering that how we'll go and adapt it in the field. So learning from all of that, and when we started doing this project, so the first thing was to bring out the use cases that we wanted to solve for and demonstrate for the WF Lighthouse project right from the users. Okay, so for that we started with actually training these people. Although for years we have tried to train people on digital and pushing them towards adoption of technology, but this time it was a much more focused approach. So what we did is we went down to the operators who were on the shop floor and the supervisors. We went down to them and we arranged sessions. So we had two types of sessions. One was a session where they understand the art of the possible with AI and IoT data. So understanding what data they have and how they can use AI to draw inferences and insights out of it. And not only that, what actions can they take? Okay, so that is one of the, and this was at a level which is a high level. The next thing that we did is we wanted to build small technical groups who can also do some sort of data analysis by themselves and not see data scientists and engineers is scarce, right? In big organizations, it becomes very difficult for us to allocate bandwidth for them. So we said, okay, let us try to build up some homegrown talent. So some of the people who were on the shop floor and more technical. So many of the engineers on the shop floor mainly, and these people would have come from engineering colleges and they were engineers and specialists in production. So we got them to cross-train and they got cross-trained on some sort of data engineering. So what happened as a result out of this is for the Lighthouse, we were able to get at least 10 use cases in this fact, because it was in Hello. And these use cases came right from the ground stuff. Okay. And the use cases were like, how do we optimize a mixer? Say if we get a particular raw material. So for rubber has a particular viscosity, right? And depends on the season, the viscosity changes, the quality of the supply changes. So if it is say a particular viscosity and the temperature, that ambient temperature is somehow, then what should be our parameters for a mixer? Or another use case would be very simple, would be like when we used to do visual inspection for each of our tires to see where their defects are. We don't do it anymore. We have cameras in place and they and have an algorithm who comes and reads that the cross section of the tire and says whether it is defective or not. So that saves us time and that saves us money. So what happened is by doing these sort of use cases and building them grounds up, it ultimately resulted in a better adoption, because this era we were their baby. We were not training them. Okay, from tomorrow you're going to use such and such product to do your work. It wasn't absolutely. So this was something which was conceived by them. They felt that they really needed it, and at the end of the day, they were using it. Yeah. And hence the adoption was much faster, much at scale. And right now we have really done wonders in this factory with the Lighthouse implementation. If I were to look in, but but not always you have, the problem is not always you have the same mandate to do it across all your factories or across all your companies. This was one company, yeah. But if I look into other companies, not always you have the mandate or the scale or the budget to do it. Okay, so for that, one thing that we have understood is that for adoption, you have to engage the end user right from day one. I know from everywhere I cannot go and do this approach, but make sure that the end user is in the loop and make sure that the person is aware of what is coming his or her way, so that he is and keep it exciting, keep it engaged throughout the life cycle of the project, and not at the very end. Yeah. So that's pretty much on it.
No, that's fantastic, Chirandeep. I don't know how much I can resonate with what you say. In fact, in most of the journeys as a consultant, when we take, right, there are so many success determined by the fact, what I call this part which you mentioned, making the organization pre-ready, right? Like the amount of importance that you need to give, not only to the amount of importance you give to build, but also to how you gear up your top management, get their buy-in. And I think this for the whole, I think we are on the globe at this point at a live. I think we can all have that experience, share that how important it is to have the pre-readiness of the top down as well as the bottom. In terms of the ground realities, people who are going to, we ignore the users for which we are building the algorithm, really, right? And coming with that point, thanks, Chiranjeev, that was a very interesting point. Coming that now we have one more gentleman, Uddhav, who is the end users are not only in one country, right? So Uddhav, your end users, I think, are across the different markets. So you have a different challenge at hand. And to continue what Chiranjeev was talking, that, how do you make it ready? What has been your global, how does standardization play? I'm bringing that point particularly because we talked about when Praveen said some part of it is in a platform. So what is the role of standardization and customization, this mix and the global sphere that you operate in?
Sure. Thanks, Mamita, for the invite. Maybe a bit of context. Yeah. So I represent Shell, but maybe I'll not talk about uh, the whole organization. I'll keep my focus on the retail space, which is, just for the sake of the audience, retail, or what we call as mobility internally in Shell, is the customer facing part of our business. This is our fuel stations. And along with the fuel stations, you may have also seen there's a convenience retail store attached to it. And yeah, Momita, to answer your question, right, I'm not sure how many people are aware the scale at which Shell operates the retail business, right? Because I think people think of Shell more as a upstream brand, but from a downstream point of view, we have presence in 80 countries, 46,000 stores globally. And in terms of just the size, I think we probably are bigger than Starbucks and McDonald's put together, right? In terms of the scale that this organization operates. So what that translates for my team, obviously, is we have limited bandwidth. I think Chirandeep also mentioned that earlier, and we cannot obviously cater to the needs of the entire organization. So I think some of the things that we try to do, maybe first let me talk about the challenges and then let me get into what we do, right? So I think the challenges that we face is each country is a business and a separate organization for us. So they may all be part of the Shell brand, but if I'm working with, let's say, somebody in Germany, somebody in Mexico, somebody in India, these are three different countries, three different companies for us, right? So it's the Shell brand, but for internal analytics, data science teams, it's a completely different setup, right? The way they operate the business, the products that are sold, the customer challenges that we have, the data challenges, the landscape in which they operate is completely different, right, for us. So just making sense of the reality of what is happening on the ground with those business teams, I think, is the first step for us, because a lot of times we are on a journey with them, right? So the analytics maturity is very different for each market. Some of the markets are fairly evolved, so they are already in the predictive and I would say prescriptive stage of analytics, while some of them are just starting off on the journey, right? So they are still trying to gather all the data, make sense, whether it is usable, not usable. We are just scratching the surface there, right? So it's very different for each country. Sometimes data availability for us is a big challenge as well. In some markets there are regulations, in certain countries there are laws that don't allow us to access some of that. In case we need external data as well, in a lot of countries we don't get access to it. So that's, I think, just the basic fundamentals is a challenge there. The third bit I would say is customizing, right? So if any product that we build, we may try to build a global solution. So let me take an example, right? So I think marketing analytics is one classical example where I think we've tried to do this, where we've tried to build a product that we think can be scaled across all the countries, because I think earlier in the panel we were talking about campaigns and personalization. So we've attempted something very similar as well. The challenges again there for us is each country will have their own way of driving the loyalty program, their own ways of reaching out to the customers, the kind of offers. So our backend and the algorithm may be common, but the way in which it's implemented, executed, the offers that we want to send out to customers, it's all specific to each market. So our intent is obviously always to build a global product to help with economies of scale, and that's the intent of having a central team work with the global organization. But yeah, I think it's always a fine balance for us as a team to say, okay, how much to customize, how much to keep a common theme. It's not always easy. It's quite tricky for us, because the moment we get into customization, everyone wants to do their own thing, right? And obviously we cannot cater to 30-40 countries wanting their own type of marketing analytics product. I mean, we won't be able to obviously manage that. So we are always in this sort of tug of war, I would say, between what we want to standardize and what they want to customize. So we're still learning. I'm not saying we've cracked that piece, but yeah, that's the journey. And those, I would say, are some of the challenges of working in such a global setup, which I think on the face of it looks same to people, but yeah, internally it's a very different story.
No, I think we were all smiling while that word tug of war, customization versus standard, and everybody who is here in the session as well, I'm sure there'll be smiles across. Everybody must have had that experience, whoever are practitioners trying to implement it, and that's so true. So let me, in the next round, maybe touch upon very specific questions to each one of you, and these are some which I have been trying to have different thought processes. So Praveen, quick one to you. Modular versus big wave. So let me just maybe spend some time. So there are two approaches, right? So either we can do, like, if you are implementing, like you talked about the pricing or the discount rationalization work or the markdown work. So if you had to take a call at the beginning between how do you really adopt this, build modular wise or a big wave, right? So you can keep everything before you release it to the ground. How do you approach it? A modular approach, having releases, or you would have big waves with finally getting when the product is almost like out there? So what's been that particular a topic, if I would want to touch?
So see, my view is that any digital solution, I mean, this suppose you're talking here algorithms led, but in general, digital solutions need to be done in a modular way, in sprints, literally, right? So we call what we call DevOps, and right. So the thing is that unlike, let's say, monolithic systems like implementing an ERP or a CM solution or banking solution, right? Which there's a very clear requirements defined and an outcome that you're driving towards, and these systems do take a while to implement, and there is a certain well-defined process to do those, which is fine. But in case of algorithm-led solution, right, that solution has to be fine-tuned. In general, what I think what we're hearing also that, and what somebody told me, and I think it resonates with me, that when it comes to implementing a solution, the algorithm itself is maybe 10-15% of the effort, right? They're all standard. They're nowadays available on cloud, including the latest ones like ChatGPT, right? You have the tools. So 10-15% is that. 30% is data, right? Your biggest problem is having the data to feed to these algorithms, right? That's not always there. So the data engineering that needs to go behind building it, and what data, I mean, even figuring out what data will work to give you the right outcomes takes a while, and it's an iterative process. And the third and the largest part of it is actually change management. The change management within the organization to adopt a solution, right? That is the most complex part. And if we try to look at where building a solution and then I will roll it out and then I will hope that everybody will adopt it. It just doesn't work like that, right? So you have to make it an iterative process where you build something, do a POC, do a pilot, take feedback, fine tune it at all levels, and fine tune the algorithm, fine tune the data inputs that go into it, right? Get feedback from the users whether it's even making sense to them, right? And like I told you, like this markdown management that we rolled out, right? It's a problem where this is being done by the business or the category teams in different brands in their own way, in Excel, and they believe they know how to do it, and they've been doing it over the last 50 years, right? This is not something new. Every season you discount product, but how do you give them the comfort that the algorithm is actually doing a better job of this, because it is simply able to consider and work with far more data in an analytical manner as compared to what a person can do in an Excel, right? But to get that comfort and to make sure that they appreciate that the outcomes that the algorithm is recommending make sense, and and actually adopt them and agree to start using them, is a long journey. And if you go and say that I'll build something and this is it, and it doesn't work, so you have to, it's never like that. So you have to perfect the model over a period of time. So it is very much an iterative journey and a modular approach. So typically, even when we build platform, we would roll it out for one brand, fine tune it, work on it, make sure they buy in, they use it, and then take it to the next brand. There's no point in trying to run on multiple tracks at the same time.
Right. And I think, yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that work more than the other one. And that brings me to two questions. One where will most probably, Chirandeep, you can take that. How important is to have impact measurement? And this is something very close to my heart. I can go on for it, but I would like you to, is how important is impact measurement on ground for a AI solution to be shown as well as built and pre-configured? How often do you have to show it?
Well. So if I have to think about impact measurement, and the first thing is what to measure. Okay, so that sign off and alignment with business has to be done right at the beginning of the project. So what are the KPIs and metrics that should be measured, and what is that is important, and understand what is important for the business. Because today I might come and say, okay, my algorithm is 95% accurate, but at the end of the day, if that 5% accuracy means a huge amount of loss even to the business, so that is where we have to come into a common ground where we say, okay, accuracy aside, this is the business impact, this is the business KPI that's getting impact. That's the outcome. Okay, so one is aligning business and signing off as to what is measured. Second is how you measure. So and the tools you measure. Okay. So one of the ways is so if I were to put in reference one of the projects that we did, and one very close to my heart is about commodity analytics. Okay. So predicting the price of commodity analytics. So if I have to measure a price, and if I am to say that, okay, I had said I am measuring the price in 7 days or 14 days. So this part I have to also be very clear which price I have to measure in 14 days, in 2 months' time, and what is more important to business, and how do I measure it? Okay, that is important. The third thing which I believe is benchmarking. And this is where one of the current projects that I'm doing, and very, very important ones for us is, and we're also in tea business. So we are trying to predict the interval between harvests, between tea plucking. So why do I plucking today? When are the next time I'll pluck? Okay, for this, I am totally dependent on the weather forecast that I get. Now, my prediction cannot be ever better than the weather forecast that I did. It can only be worse than that. And hence, some sort of benchmarking to let the business know, this is my input when I'm getting the input, this for a forecast data, for a weather, and these are very dynamic, right? So they're dynamic in the first place. And obviously, my accuracy cannot go beyond, say, plus minus 2 days. So those sort of expectation setting. And the last thing is to make sure that you continuously measure these and display to the business. So for you to be making sure that if you're displaying it to the business, okay. So one thing is that business only appreciates it when they see they're getting some continuous value. So what even we have done in some cases is we have built dashboards solely for business stakeholders, which tell them the value they're getting out of the project. Either be it in terms of accuracy, in terms of how much of monetary benefit that they have got, in terms of how much of some other benefit, in terms if it is in a setting of a plant, it might be the cycle time improvement they have got. So we have made sure that we have dashboards built and the business stakeholders are able to access them and continuously get updated on what are the benefits. Because at the end of the day, whatever project we do, if we do not tell them back what is the benefits that they're getting out of it, it doesn't help in the long run.
Sure. We have a minute or two, I think, for you. Last one. We've heard all of us having organizations being AI ready. If you had to have 2 points to say that, okay, what do you mean by AI readiness? And there could be many. What would be the prerequisite or the AI readiness that an organization need to have?
I think I'll go back to my company's some of the challenges, and I would say the biggest one is good quality trustable data, right? I think no solution or AI or data science, I think even if you want to work on Excel, would not work if you don't have trustable good quality data which the business can over a period of time trust, because your solution is as good as the data that you put into it. Yeah, so that would be my first and most important one to answer your question. Second one, from a AI readiness point of view, is I think again someone has already, but I will probably repeat it, is change management. So the end users, the business users, need to believe in the product, need to have faith that the solutions output may be slightly better than what the human mind could come up with. The algorithm could probably do a slightly better job, if not very better, much better than what the human mind is doing. So I think having that faith and trusting it, not discarding products after POC stages, making sure that it reaches the end mile. And I think organizations can truly unlock the value of AI only after it's implemented, right? So I think that faith and change management across different levels is very key for the products to enable value. I think the previous speaker was also talking about value and why that's important. Unless I think you have that buy-in from the business teams and the faith, it's not going to happen.
No, I think absolutely can't agree with you more. So I think we'll have a quick wrap, but thank you so much, Chirandeep, Praveen, Uddhav. I think a few topics which has come across, and for all people who are listening in, AI ready in terms of data, AI ready in terms of, getting your organization prepped, and the end users, aligning with them. Praveen, you talked about a very interesting one on how modular approach, getting it off the ground. So these topics are very critical, I think, for the success of the AI implementations. And as practitioners and all of us here, I think we've seen that journey, and I hope the audience here also gets a lot of juice from what you all just discussed. So thank you all. And with that, if there are no questions, we can wrap up. Thank you all for your time. And that's a wrap up from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.